Hello guys, Fourfinger here, and I just wanted to go over my build plan for early access. Now, I've been theory crafting Stormweaver quite a bit, and I was on the fence between Invoker and Storm, but at the end I kind of spent more time on theory crafting this, so I'm probably gonna stick with Sorceress, but Monk looks really strong, especially with the two new notables that we have, Lead Me Through Grace and Protect Me From Harm. Like, you can scale this really well into the late game, even though you're losing 40% evasion, you get a bunch of physical damage reduction, and you get a bunch of spirit that you can use for trigger gems or even persistent buffs that you're missing. So Monk game is looking strong, but I'm gonna have to leave it for my second character. And when it comes to Stormweaver, I'm pretty much stuck between two choices, Cast on Crit and then Elemental Storm. Now, when it comes to Elemental Storm, one problem I have is that I can't get both Strike Twice Elemental Storm with the Rain Dancer and the Force of Will, and since I will be mana stacking on both those builds, that's the only thing I'm kind of breaking between. Now, it's all gonna depend how much damage Elemental Storm does, and let's say if it's really good, then you kind of have to pick those two. Like, getting 100%, 150% more cooldown recovery rate is really insane, and if you are, like I said, building around this, not picking this node would be a waste, and picking Elemental Storm on its own just doesn't feel good enough to justify it, so we'll have to see how it works out and then pick it. But if you think it's not good enough, you will have to go for Constant Gale and Force of Will, because this is just amazing for mana stackers. You get 1% increased effect of Arcane Surge on you per 15 mana, which is already giving you, like, what, 10% cast speed and 200% and 20% more mana regen rate. So if you have like 3k mana, you're getting 30% more cast speed, not increased, more, and 60% more mana regen. So this is just really nuts. So I'm not sure about this one yet, but we'll talk about them both and decide. When it comes to Heart of Storm, this is my fourth ascendancy. Like I said, we go Strike Twice, then we go Constant Gale and Force of Will. Thing with the Strike Twice is it's really good for me because I have no downside. It's gonna be used with my Conduit, and I'm gonna shock quite often, so every time I do shock, I'm gonna instantly remove it to buff my Conduit's damage. So this is really good for that. Now, since we already have Chaos Inoculation planned in this build, we take no Chaos damage, no bleeding, nor poison, so getting this to help you out with elemental damage taken, you only have physical left to worry about. So if there are certain conversions from physical to elemental, like in PoE 1, it should be easy to like make a good layers of defense. If not, we'll just have to figure out something as we go, because we still miss a bunch of information regarding gear. Now, when it comes to other ascendancies, Scouring Winds seems pretty decent. It's gonna give you 20% additional resistance, lower the affected resistance by additional 20%. So this is pretty much ascendancy that you pick if you are going for negative resistance, otherwise it's way easier to get pan. So if you're not running conductivity, Scouring Winds, and inflicting exposures, this just doesn't make too much sense to me, because you can get like 15 from the tree here, 18 from this, and then you can put 20 on the support gem. You can really easily get that resistance to 0, and because penetration no longer goes into negatives, having this has no effect, like I said, unless you're primarily scaling it to get to negative on certain mobs. But that's too much investment and ascendancy point for something that you don't really need that much. I think there's better ways to scale, in my opinion. And then finally we have Heavy Snows and Shaper of Winter. Both of those are really, really good. But like I said before, since I have to have Strike Twice, and I do want Force of Will for my mana stackers, justifying those two is going to be really hard for me. And I also have low hitting abilities, and since stuff like, for example, Ball of Lightning, it hits really low, it hits often, but it has this 750% more chance to shock, which is pretty much the equivalent of shocks enemies as though dealing percent damage. That's the same thing. They just probably didn't fix the wording yet, because if you do calculate it, and if you know how elements work in PoE 2, then you would understand that this is the same thing if the number is the same. This is obviously 400 and this is 750, but when it comes down, if they were the same, they would do the same thing. And the way this works is ailments in PoE 2 are kind of different. In PoE 1, depending on how much damage you do, the stronger the shock. Now, the shock has the base line that you can increase, but the stronger the damage, the bigger the chance for you to actually inflict the shock, not increase its value. So what that means is skills that hit like really low have really low chance of inflicting shock, which are of course lightning based. But if you have stuff like this, then at least it gives you a better chance of inflicting them, and because you hit often, it makes sense, right? So yeah, that's pretty much when it comes to shocks. And yeah, they depend on the element threshold. So if you hit for 100%, the base chance to shock is like 25%. If you hit for like 50% of that element threshold, it's 12.5, and so on. You get the idea. That being said, let's just jump into my build. Like I said, this is my picks for regarding the Ascendancies, and when it comes to tree, there is a lot of ways to build, but building it now would make no sense. Because, like I said, we still don't know what half of those nodes do. Excuse me. When it comes to my setup, I'm running Ball of Lightning and Lightning Storm, and they're pretty much going to be my shock spells that are going to proc shock that Lightning Conduit will pretty much consume. We don't have a tooltip for Lightning Conduit yet, but I assume it's something similar to PoE 1. Again, that's just an assumption. I don't think why would they change it, but it does say in the tooltip that it will remove the shock above the ability, so that's fine. When it comes to Ball Lightning, I went with Conduction. Support skills have 100% increased chance to shock. This helps out a lot with proccing Conduit and stuff. Inspiration is pretty much gonna be used and might not be needed, especially if you're scaling Arcane Surge. I just put this because we are kind of starved when it comes to support gems, but you can replace this with few other gems as I'll talk when we cover everything else. Unleash, really decent support spell. Like I said, not much to say about it. Every time you cast a spell, you gain a seal for 200% of the cast time, and after you have maximum seals, they get unleashed, but they do less damage, so get like more lightning bolts spreading out. Volley is something that looks way better than greater multiple projectiles. You could go with wild shards. Wild shards are pretty much when I have 20% chance to fire 8 around you, but I don't like relying on the chances to proc. And only having one lightning bolt feels kind of weird for clear speed. So only getting to 20% less damage for like 6 projectiles looks really, really nice to me. They're not gonna be spreading out like cone. For example, greater multiple projectiles in PoE 1 would spread like a cone, but volley would go like in line. But still, it's gonna cover a lot of the screen because ball lightnings also have radius around them. So I think this is gonna be really decent for vape clear. Now, finally, slower projectiles. This basically just increases your damage because the slower the ball, the more it's going to hit the same target. Because if this is the target and this is the ball, the slower it moves, more time it has to hit him. You know, it makes sense. Thing that you should know about stuff like ball lightning and lightning conduit, they do not get scaled by area of effect damage. They can get stuff like what's called. Let me show you. This is area of effect. Now this will increase the damage of the ball of lightning, stuff like area effect, because it's gonna spend more time and it's gonna have bigger range. So example, if this is the mob, before you were hitting it from this distance, if you start hitting from like a bit further away, you have like more time on the mob, eventually translating to more damage, if that makes sense. But the pure damage tag that you get from like controlled, what's it called? Not controlled destruction, my bad, concentrated effect, sorry. Concentrated effect, you don't get the damage bonus from it. It's same like in PoE 1, you just get the less area of effect and you don't want that. So keep that in mind when building. Just because something does have a tag of AoE does not mean it's going to be scaling with AoE damage. Only reason this does have that tag is because of the fires beams that targets within 1.8 meters, so you only increase that radius but not the damage of the zaps that they throw out. Now, Lightning Conduit, I have socketed this with Control Destruction because I'm not running crit on this first version of the build. Elemental Focus because they are not going to be inflicting any ailments and they will be consuming shock anyway, so this is going to be straight up damage increase. We just don't have the tooltip yet, but just imagine there's percent damage increase on this one. Lightning Pen, depending on how much resistance bosses will have, I'll see if this is needed or not, but for now I'm just keeping it because, like I said, combining it with the tree stuff and the exposure that we get from the Lightning Storm, as I'll explain, should be more than enough. Spell Echo, this is really, really OP. We're also going to be having 2 shocks, so this basically gives you less attack speed, but makes spell hit twice. So this is really, really decent to have. And then we have Lightning Mastery, because there's no other really better gems that I found that I can use for all 3. So 1 level of supported lightning skills is okay, I guess. We'll see how that works. We just know that skills scale a bit better with socket gems in PoE 2. Now when it comes to Lightning Storm, this is pretty much going to be my filler ability that's going to proc like stuff like, if I said it here, like we said, if I do go for the what's it called, the Tempest Caller and Rain Dancer, I will socket it with Inevitable Critical just to increase the chance for it to actually proc it. And then we have Lightning Exposure, because this is hitting, like I said, 2.5 times per second if it's single target, and if you have multiple enemies around, it hits every 0.05 seconds, which makes shocks really easy to happen. And then when you do get shocks, you get the Exposure, which removes the resistance. You have Overcharge, which pretty much makes shocks stronger. That base 30% gets increased, but they do have less duration. But then again, like I said, duration is not an issue for us, because as soon as we do get shock, we consume it. We have Enervation. This is pretty much mana regen. Like, you can never get enough mana regen when you stack Archmage, so this is decent to have. And then you have an Hourglass, because it has no downside, it's just 35% more damage, since this skill is active for like, what, 10 seconds? So having that 8 seconds cooldowns doesn't really change anything for us, right? It does support any damaging skill that you use yourself, so it should work for this as well. And yeah, when it comes to the Sigil of Power, Mana Tempest, and Voltaic Mark, this is just your damage increases. Now, Sigil of Power is going to scale insanely well with Mana Tempest. Mana Tempest essentially gives you 58% more lightning, more damage as extra lightning damage, but it spends 1% mana per second. Now, a lot of people were talking like, okay, it's gonna take forever for you to scale Arcane Surge, but like people either not read this or don't understand how this works. When you do use Archmage, it makes all of your abilities cost 5% of your max mana. Then every time you use ability, it uses the base. That's already like double with the multipliers. For example, this spell echo has 1.5 multiplier. So when you count all of that in, you can burn your mana like this. And if you do burn your mana that quickly, let's say the spell hits for 60 mana, and you have like 1k mana. Then you get spell echo, which is 5% of 1k, which is 50 mana. So 60 plus 50, that's 110, and then you have 30% of that, which is gonna start stacking up every time you use an extra ability. So you can probably get your Arcane Surges proccing in less than like 10 seconds. So you can almost have a full uptime as long as you can regen the mana before using it next time. Now, this is also really good if you burn mana this quickly for the Sigil of Power, because the way it works is more mana you spend, the faster you scale the stages, and once you do get to the last stage, you are gonna be hitting for like 56% more spell damage, and that's really, really decent to have around. So really good synergy between those two. And then finally, Voltaic Mark. This is going to increase your shock by 50% chance to shock, and then effect by 30 as well. So overall, those are your like buffs. Now, what I plan to do at first, but I won't have enough spirit, is to socket all those three together into elemental invocation. Excuse me, I just ate. My stomach is constantly. So yeah, if you do go for elemental invocation, you can pretty much proc all of those three at the same time. But justifying 60 spirit is kind of like too much, especially when you use Archmage and Blasphemy. I'm not sure how much freedom we'll have with that. So we'll see how that one goes. And if you do something like this, you can also use like same support gems on all three. Now for Sigil of Power, I use reduce cooldown. So if sometimes boss uses some area of the damage effect on your play Sigil of Power and you have to move, it's gonna come down quicker, so you can use it again on the other side. So just for that. More duration, we want it to last as long as possible, because when we do get it to like 4th stage, which should be pretty quickly with Mana Tempest, it just lasts longer, so we can just abuse it a little bit for a bit more time. Voltaic Mark is pretty much like supported with Mana Tempest is supported with Arcane Surge, like we said before, and Area of Effect, because it only has 2.6 meters, and the Sigil of Power is 3 meters, so if you use Area of Effect, they kind of even out in the radius, so you can stand in both at the same time. It's just convenient, I guess. When it comes to this, I place the Voltaic Mark and Elemental Invocation here, and also Orb of Storms. Now, like I said, if I do run with Elemental Invocation, then all of those will be placed as well, within Orb of Storms too. So we'll see how that one goes. We still have to wait and see exactly how stuff scales out. Now, this is not going to be Orb of Storm setup. This is either going to be like a Elemental Storm setup, or I'm going to replace it with something else. I still didn't make up my mind. But just keep in mind, if you do run Elemental Storm, it's going to be scaling with both physical, lightning, fire, and cold modifiers for the support gems. So you can put stuff like Physical Mastery, Fire Mastery, and Cold Mastery, since I don't need them for my other gems. And all of those will increase the level of the the elemental storm, sorry. And because we are, like I said, we really start when it comes to support gems, I went over each one. You don't have too many better options, and you can just add on top concentrated effect, which is 30% more area damage, which will work on this, but 50% less area of effect. Now, when it comes to bossing, this should be really good, and for clear, you won't necessarily need this for clear, so that's cool. Fifth Affliction says support skill deal 30% more damage, non-ailment damage over time. This is not ailment damage over time, but it does last 20% less, so keep that in mind. I still think it's worth getting it, so yeah. Finally, Archmage, this is a no-brainer. We're scaling mana. More mana we have, the more it hits. Really decent ability to have. And finally, Blasphemy. Blasphemy is like going to be our temporal chains and enfeeble. with the, what's it called, with Whispers of Doom, which makes us have one more curse. This is going to apply both of them to give us that extra layer of defense, and then clarity for mana regen while this is active. And I suppose that wording on clarity is also not quite correct, because certain skills and spells have either cost multiplier or reservation multiplier, and there's only 2 spells so far on the database, PoE2, let me show you that. Sorry, I didn't type it well, PoE DB2. So there's only 2 current support gems that actually use the reservation multipliers, and that's Heightened Curse, Heightened Curse and Herbalism. Those 2 are going to be reservation multipliers, and no other spell has this. So if you go and search reservation, only those 2 spells come out. So I'm not sure how. I don't think they're quite done with like changing this. So I assume most of the stuff like clarity, vitality, and that will be multipliers to the persistence buff that you socket them on, because it says support persistent buff skills. So it's probably going to multiply the spirit, but if it does not have multiplier cost, and if it's only like cost multiplier, it should not scale the buff itself, but the abilities that it's chained to, if that makes sense. For example, before we talked about elemental invocation, so if you do have elemental invocation, which is 60 spirit, and you do put some like Orb of Storm and then use some multiplying support gem, it's not gonna increase the spirit, but instead the mana of that spell that you're proccing. So keep that in mind as well. Now that's a lot of information, like I said, being shown on once, but just not knowing how specific interactions happen is going to decide how I'm going to switch this up. But overall the build is pretty straightforward. Ball of Lightning and Lightning Storm procs a lot of shocks. You consume shocks for Lightning Conduit. Sigil of Power, Mana Tempest, and Voltaic Mark is going to be your burst windows for bosses. You're gonna pop each 3 of them. That's why I said having Elemental Invocation would be really nice if you have extra spirit, so you don't have to press each one individually, you just press one button and you burst. And then you can increase them all with duration as well, so that's something to think about. Now, I'm either going to be running Orb of Storms here, or I'm going to put the Elemental Storm, like I said, depending on how good it is, and if it's worth dropping if it's worth dropping either the Force of Will or Strike Twice, because you have to drop one of those in order to get it. I'm not quite sure what I think about that one yet. So yeah, this is pretty much my plan. And if you do go for my other plan that is Cast on Crit, this could have some nice synergy, because abilities such as Ball Lightning hit every 0.2 seconds, Lightning Storm 0.4 if it's a single enemy, or 0.05 if it's like multiple enemies, which can proc quite often. And then Orb of Storms is hitting every 3.3 seconds and every time you cast a spell near it. And because you will be scaling Arcane Surge cast speed, this is gonna make it proc even more. So all that being said, because this is global, you could pretty much scale crit to like maybe 30%, and you could proc like Conduit probably like every like second or faster with this, which could make this build really viable. Now I didn't like go too in depth until I see if this actually works the way I think it does, but every ability that has hit and hits quite often is going to be really amazing for Cast on Crit. Yeah, I probably forgot a bunch of things, so I'll probably add them in comments as I watch this video. I made it on the spot, and it's already 18 minutes long. So if you guys have any questions, let me know, I'll try to answer them, and thanks for watching, I guess, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya, guys.